You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the productivity specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. Today is episode 317, How to Create a Marketing Plan You'll Actually Stick to with Lauren Tilden. If you're a small business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Lauren is a maker, retail shop owner, podcast host, marketing coach on a mission to help business owners do better marketing more consistently. An ex-corporate marketer, Lauren fell in love with small business through her first small business, the plant-inspired stationery business, Good Sheila. A couple years after starting Good Sheila, she took the reins of a retail shop her mom owned, Station 7. And as of 2020, she hosts Making Good, a podcast for small business owners who want to make a big impact. Lauren believes that one of the best ways to make a positive impact on the world is through great marketing. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to invite you to take my next level business owner quiz. What is more productive than taking a short 3-minute quiz to find out what's most holding you back from taking your business to the next level? And after you get those results, you will get a personalized curated playlist of episodes from the podcast that specifically have strategies and methods to help you solve those challenges. Seriously, go take the quiz right now, hit pause, and then come back and listen to my conversation with Lauren. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. Again, that's amberdelagarza.com/quiz, or you can find the link in the show notes. And now let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Welcome to the show, Lauren. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Amber. I'm super excited.
Yeah, we got to chat before on your podcast. We got to chat a little bit before today, and I'm really looking forward to talking about how to stay consistent with marketing. This topic is so relevant to my listeners. Marketing is incredibly important for the success of our businesses. And I'm sure this is what you're talking about. You understand that consistency can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, consistency is the most unsexy, difficult, surprisingly difficult, because it seems like it should be so simple. Just keep showing up with what you said you were going to do. But I would guess that most listeners can relate to the feeling of making a plan or having intentions of like what they're going to do and then just falling off the wagon at some point. And I think as we record this, it's early in January. New Year's resolutions are a perfect example of actually you can have all the best intentions in the world, but consistency is really hard. Showing up, even when you don't feel like it, even when you're not seeing the results right away, it's really hard to just keep chugging along with like the faith that it's all going to do something for you. So
yeah, that's actually perfect into my first question, which was, what are the reasons why you find people can't stay consistent? So I hear you. Number one is not that instant gratification, like questioning, is this even working? Is anyone even hearing this? Why should I keep showing up? But I'm sure there's a few other reasons.
I think that's really the big one is consistency requires consistent. So like showing up day after day, putting in the work, the time, the hours, devoting your energy to something. And if you're not seeing in the short term that it's paying off, like you're not seeing the sales right away or, the audience growth or the newsletter growth, whatever it is that your goal is, which we'll definitely talk about. If you're not seeing that result right away, it's really hard to stay excited about it. And so for me, like I a big missing piece, which isn't totally what we're talking about today, from most marketing, I think is just like genuinely being excited about what you're doing, being excited about your work and being excited about the marketing you're creating, because not only does that energy really come through, but like that is what keeps us going, is actually wanting to do the work that you have on your plate. So, I would say that the biggest reason people struggle with consistency is just not seeing the results right away. But another factor would be making a plan that just doesn't really make sense, like really biting off more than you can chew. And so,
Yes.
you make a plan, and when you actually look at it, it's like 20 hours of work a week, and you have 5 hours of work that you can spend on marketing. That's just setting yourself up to fail. And I'm sure that we'll get into this, but one of my big views around planning and around consistency is set a low bar. Like, set yourself up to easily accomplish everything on your list. And if you want to do more and you want to overachieve after that, like, go ahead. But being able to end the day feeling like, yes, I got through everything on my list, I'm set up to do it again tomorrow. That's a totally different energy than I had 15 things on my list today to quote unquote be consistent. I didn't do any of it, or I did 2 things, and now I feel like I'm 15 tasks behind to even start the next day. It just like doesn't feel good. That's not something that is going to keep you excited to keep going.
That's right.
And I would just say one final thing is perfectionism, feeling like if you don't complete the plan perfectly, like 100 out of 100 tasks exactly as you anticipated them, then somehow you're not consistent, and then like just throwing in the towel, basically, kind of all or nothing thinking. This is a big mindset shift that myself and a lot of my clients and members of my program have had to make, is consistency doesn't mean 100% perfection. It just means like most of the time you do what you set out you said you were going to do, or what's on your plan. So I think I consider myself still being consistent if I do it 80% of the time. And that's, for some reason, we have this association with the word consistent that we think that has to mean perfection, and they are 2 totally different things. So I would say those are a few reasons that consistency is really, really hard.
Yeah, I agree with you. When we end the day and feel like defeated instead of accomplished, doesn't make us want to get up and do it again by any means.
Yeah.
And, we all have real lives and run real businesses, that things come up. So to think that consistency needs to look like 100% can often make people not even start. Like they just know that that's not possible. But to your point, have they invited themselves to say, well, is 80% or 90% of my consistency number? So I really like that reframe.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, when you said to keep it simple, one of the things that I see with my clients is that, well, again, this is the first of the year, but anytime they're doing this, whole marketing recommitment reset, it's not like, okay, I'm going to show up on social media, specifically Instagram. It's like, I'm showing up on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm going to do lives, and I'm going to start blogging, and then, this SEO thing. And they just literally are spreading themselves so thin that even if they are showing up that 80%, they're pushing out seeing any kind of results, because they're diffusing that energy over so many different strategies. Do you find that to be very similar with many business owners?
Yeah, I think a lot of business owners, and especially the ones that kind of come into my world, and maybe the same is true for you, Amber, we're like overachievers. We want to do everything. We want to do everything really well. And so it's kind of counterintuitive to be like, you know what, there's 100 things I'm going to be doing. I'm going to pick 2 and go like really commit to those 2 things. I think we'll come back to it probably throughout this conversation, but one of the big things that makes it easy in my mind to kind of cut out the noise and be able to narrow in on just a few things that you're going to really commit to is being really, really clear on what your goals are. Because the fact is, there are so many things we could be doing with our time. Listener, I guarantee everything you have on your New Year's marketing wish list, there are 50 more things you could add to that. If the idea is I'm going to do everything I possibly can, that's just not really a good way to approach marketing, because like you said, exactly like you said, when you diffuse your effort in so many different directions, you don't go very far. There's a book, Essentialism, which I'm sure you are familiar with. And in the book, there's this one graphic that I think about all the time, and I'll try to describe it, but maybe we could link it in the show notes if you're able to. It's online because it's so powerful. And I literally put it in like 80% of the presentations I give because it's such a kind of mind shifter. So think about two starting points for a race, let's say. In one of them, you're going 1 inch in 12 different directions. So 12 are all the different tasks: marketing, SEO, social media, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, podcasting, YouTube, like whatever all of these different marketing things they think you want to do are. Those are one starting point, and you go 1 inch in each of those directions. So you're making 1 inch of progress in a lot of ways. On the other starting point is the same start, but it's all of those 1 inches you're putting into one thing. So let's say it's podcasting, or email marketing is a great one. Even like it could be a social media platform, but one thing. Then you get all 12 of those, one after another, after another, after another, and you're going a foot of progress in one direction versus 12 1 inch.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't know if I
totally.
illustrated that visual.
I know, I can visualize it. I give an example, and as corny as this is, and I don't even know where I got it from, but for years I've shared this, is when you go to the little carnivals and you sit down and you have the racehorses and you have to spray your water gun, like on the little bullseye, and make the horse run across. Is that when I see my clients spreading themselves over multiple strategies or multiple projects, it's like you have to bet on one horse. Like if you were sitting there and deciding you're going to spray your water on each of them all the way down the line, then just like you were saying, the horses just go a little bit, each of them. Or you stay laser focused and you just put all of your attention on one horse, and it's going to actually get to the finish line.
I love that visual. That's really
right. And I swear I do not know how that came. And it's so similar to what you were saying. And I don't know that I've read the book, but I don't know that I actually took in that image as you said you did, but very similar. Mm-hmm. And so then it's shorthand, because then that becomes the behavior and a habit of okay, yes, I know, you intellectually know, bet on one horse. And then we get tempted, and there's then we have all these things going on. And then it's shorthand. And I tell my clients, hold on, which horse are you betting on? And, once you tell the story once, they're like, okay, all right, recommit. Which horse am I betting on? Mm-hmm. But to that point, the betting on, it's often because they are not sure they're going to pick the right strategy. It's from fear. It's from scarcity. It's from, I should be doing all the things so that I can figure out which one might work. And so what do you have to say about that? How do they bet on one horse? And when you see your clients doing that, what is the experience?
Yeah. I mean, marketing is art and it's science. So there's no if you are this and this is your goal, here's spit out perfect answer of what to do. So there is some element of this that's trying things, committing to an amount of time that you're going to try it, enough time to have actually seen an impact, not 2 days and I don't see an explosion of sales, so I'm giving up on this. There is some element that's trial and error, and just giving yourself permission to change courses if what you're doing, you give it a really fair shot and it, for some reason, is not paying off. But you can really reduce the chances of that happening by just getting super intentional about what you actually choose. And I think a few things to keep in mind that will help you pick the right things to spend your marketing effort and time and money on are, number one, knowing your ideal customer super, super, super well. Who are they? What do they care about? What are their pain points? What keeps them up at night? What are they thinking about? What do they want to learn? All of the things, and especially their behavior, not just what are they thinking, but where are they? Are they first thing in the morning opening their email inbox? That's the first thing they do. Are they on social media? Which social media platforms? What time do they tend to go on? The better you know your ideal customer and who you really want to be serving and selling to, the better you can meet them where they are, essentially. It doesn't serve you at all to be on LinkedIn doing a lot of LinkedIn marketing, no matter what results other people are getting on LinkedIn, if your ideal customer doesn't really use LinkedIn. So the first starting point of all of this is knowing your ideal customer, inside and out. A lot of people, when they talk about ideal customer, research and, developing that avatar, as you might hear people call it. They really focus on demographics. So how old are they? What's their gender? And I think all of that is a little bit less important. It's actually a lot less important than what they do on a day-to-day basis, like what media publications they read or how they spend their time, what they do first thing in the morning, and what's going on in their head. So my recommendation would be to focus a lot more on like the psychographics is what marketers call it, what's happening and their behaviors, than, they're in this income range and this gender and this race. Like that to me is a little bit less relevant.
I have a question. I know you have more advice, but I want to ask, can you give us a few tips on how do you intimately get to know your ideal client like that? Like, we've heard this, I'm sure that we've heard this before, and yet we can leave and be like, great, so how do I intimately figure this out?
Yeah, for sure. There's so many places to start with this. And I think it a little bit depends on where you are in your business. So if you're just starting out from scratch and you haven't really worked with anyone yet, you have an opportunity to kind of decide who you want your ideal customer to be and find them and create something just for them from scratch. If you're a little bit more established in your business, which I'm guessing most folks listening have a business, they've done some work so far, there's a lot of really fun ways to do this. One great thing to do is to think about those like best fit clients, customers who you just wish you could clone, work with over and over again. Like it's such a delightful experience. They get it. Like it was an easy sell to work with them. They're fun to work with. Like you just really connect and kind of are aligned. Those people are really magical. And if you can incentivize them somehow to sit down with you, record a Zoom call, go get coffee in person and ask them just tons of questions, start to finish. You can find great lists of these questions. Like if you Google ideal customer avatar interview or ideal customer interview, you'll find a ton of different questions. But the idea is really, you just want to get to know them. You want to know what they care about. You want to know what they think about, what they struggle with as it relates to your product, but even in general, like where are they in their life? It's really, the more you know, the better. There's nothing you could learn that wouldn't be useful to you in some way. And you can incentivize these. A lot of folks will incentivize them with like, I'll give you a gift card to your favorite small business or whatever they would be compelled by. You could donate an amount to charity for each person who agrees to do one of these interviews with you. So a face-to-face talking interview is kind of like, in my mind, the gold standard of this. And especially when you can do it with someone who is already the kind of person you want to work with. They worked with you before, they get it. Like I said, they didn't have to be sold on it really hard. They just kind of connect with what you have to offer.
Yeah.
Other things would be just quickly a couple other ideas, like on social media. You can do a lot of great, like just super small, easy questions on things like Instagram stories. You can do a survey. This is better if you've got an email list, and especially like a pretty site, not huge, but just like, only a small percentage of people who are on your email list will actually fulfill your survey. That's just kind of how it is. So the more people, the better with that. And then also another thing I like to really think about is doubling down on what is already working and like looking at your research. So if I feel like I need to just kind of dig into where is my ideal customer at? What do they want? I can look at my sales, like what offers are selling the best. I can look at where they're coming from. When I look at the customers that I love working with, where did they find me? What time of year was it? What platform was it on? All of that's really interesting data. You can look at, just anything you have about any data you have is so valuable. Like what links do they click on in your emails? What types of content are they responding to on social media? Like what's really blowing up versus what's kind of like not performing as well. All of this can just give you little bits and pieces of data and information about what your ideal customer wants and where you can find them.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a lot of obviously being in the trenches, but pausing and evaluating and being willing to not be attached to the initial plan. And I say that for myself. That's how I started. I was like, nope, I got a plan. I'm working the plan. And I would be hesitant to like stop and be like, okay, like what exactly is working or not working? When I first started in business, I didn't know exactly where to look. So I'm like, just keep doing it. And, you know, in hindsight, that didn't serve me well. And once I got into the mentality around marketing of like, well, let's experiment with it. Let's just see what could work. Let's see where the clients are at. So just a shift in my own journey to just say, I agree with you 100%. And I wasn't always there myself. I really had to get there.
And I think there could be folks listening who are like, well, wait a second. Like you said, be consistent. Like now you're saying try a bunch of different things and experiment. And I do think there's a fine line. And the suggestion I would give, which Amber, I'm sure is what you're doing, is set a finite amount of time for trying new things. So I'm going to try TikTok, let's say. I'm going to commit to doing 4 TikTok videos a week for 60 days. And that's like consistency is a win for me. If I show up for those 60 days, at 60 days, I'll reevaluate. Is this helping me move toward my goals? Then you're still consistent versus like, okay, I did it for 7 days. I didn't really see anything happening. So like, you know, I'm just going to stop. So giving
have a predetermined stop date before you're making the decision based on how you feel or what you want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what I loved about this whole conversation, and this is going to be the through thread as we move through, is that you can't really call it if you weren't consistent. Like you really don't know if it worked. You really don't know if you liked it. You really don't know if it was landing with your clients. And so whatever data you were looking at, if you weren't consistent, it's not really valuable data. So the only control like part of this, because man, marketing is often a shot in the dark, but the only control here is you. How do you show up and how do you show up consistently to try and get some, ironically, consistent data feedback?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a really interesting way of saying it. Like you are the factor that makes the difference. And that's true in so many ways in marketing. Yeah. Like the more you can put your personality, your style, your opinions, like the more you can be in your marketing, the better. Like the more you're going to stand out. But you're right. Like whether a tactic or a strategy works for you, the only way you can know that is if you do it over and over again, not you like sample it for 2 days. You're not giving it a fair enough chance then to know whether it would work. So yeah, I'm really glad that you said that way because it's so true.
Yeah, I'm actually going to bring us back to something you said at the beginning. I mean, it was one of your opening lines was, you know, it's something that you really can't enjoy doing, which is marketing. Some reference to that is like, and my head said, yeah, oftentimes we do this of like, we have to do it, not that we get to do it. And now that you were talking about, you know, you being you, and, you know, I'm just going to share a quick story for anyone that's new on the podcast that hasn't heard this, is that, look, like I started my business blogging because everyone said that's the way you needed to blow up. Like back in 2012, 13, 14, like that was the big thing. And so it was a strategy that was proven. But Lauren, I hated writing. Like I hated it, man. And there was no way that by the time I was pacing behind my assistant, she was writing the words. It was getting edited. It looked all polished to be on a podcast because I was trying to be not on podcast. There you go. I just ruined the end. All polished to be on the website. My voice was completely washed away. My personality, because it wasn't a medium that I enjoyed, wasn't showing through. So I would be in the office writing these blogs, and then I would leave, drive home, and listen to podcasts. And literally, like one day I was like, I like talking. Like maybe I should do that. And I share this as like, it became something that I get to do, something that I look forward to, because I also found something that I enjoyed. And look, no one here is trying to run a business that they don't enjoy. And marketing is never going away. Like your business is always going to need some level of marketing. So my advice is like, find something that you enjoy at the intersection of Lauren's great advice of like, making sure your clients are there. Like you can't just be on TikTok if that's what you enjoy and your clients aren't there. So a combination of both.
Totally. And I think the sort of like unexpected positive of that is not only is consistency a lot easier when you enjoy it, like you were just describing, but you will be your best. You will be your most magnetic, your most charming, your most interesting to the right people when you're doing something that is fun for you, at least a lot of the time. Nothing is fun all of the time. Like,
Yeah.
I'm here this morning with my tech issues from podcasting. I love podcasting more than anything, but like, there's always the moments that are harder, but find something that you like most of the time. And that's going to help you shine and help you like be your best and most compelling and magnetic to the right people self. The one thing I like to just remind people is like, you are your business's biggest asset. The only thing that no one else can have is you. Like anyone can try your strategy or your tactics or like copy you in any way, but no one can be like you in the essence of you as a person. I think like growing up, we're taught how to fit in with everyone else and like kind of fit in with the flock. And one really fun thing about marketing is it's our job to stand out. It's our job to show how we're different than every other option out there in our category or other services that people could choose instead of us. Our job is to say, this is why I'm different. This is why I'm not like everyone else. And really the number one best way to do that is just like put you front and center. Sometimes it's your face, sometimes it's your voice, sometimes it's your opinions. It could even be your political beliefs. Like whatever is you, I would stand for like 110%, like let that show. And that is to me like one of the biggest marketing superpowers any of us has is just to really lean into who we are and our own voice.
I love everything about that. And man, the clip for today's episode is going to be find something you love most of the time. Like that's real. Like as much as I just said I love podcasting, I shared with you the hours of my computer fighting me yesterday preparing for this day of interviews. Yep, I would not have put that on my fun list. Like my husband walked in, I was on my knees in my office and had my head on my desk. And he's like, that kind of day? And I was like, yeah, that kind of day. Like that's real life. And so thank you for sharing that because what would have happened is somebody could leave this conversation and they would be like, oh, I don't love this all the time. I'm doing it wrong. On to the next thing, on to the next thing. And the truth is those little words of most of the time. All right, that was great. And let's go dive into a little bit about the you. So when we're us, that helps us be consistent because we don't have to put on an act. We don't have to get ready in a certain way or be in a certain energy where we're trying to be somebody else. But let's be honest, in the world of marketing, like you're looking at what everyone else is doing. You're like, what's trending? Oh, whether I want to dance on TikTok or not, maybe that's what I should be doing. There's a lot of temptation out there. I can't wait to hear your advice. And I will just share that the biggest gift I gave myself was to tune out everyone in my space. The minute I shut it all off and I was so confident in my own views on my lane and like how I was able to help my clients, having that confidence and never consuming content in a similar space again, let me show up as me because I was drowning myself out in other people's content, advice, voice, and I needed to find my own.
Yeah. I love that so much. And I think that's really important permission to anyone listening to just like, I don't know, like for me, what it turned out to be, honestly, was starting a new Instagram account. And like when I followed people, being super thoughtful about like, do I want this as part of my like content diet of what I'm consuming? Do I want this in my mind and my brain? Like, how does it make me feel? It doesn't have to be about the other person at all. Just because for some reason you're consuming someone's content and it just doesn't feel good to you, that doesn't mean anything bad about them. Like it's not an insult to them. It's nothing. It's probably your own something, but you're allowed to just say like, I don't want this energy coming in and I'm just not going to follow that account or whatever. So I think you're right. Like being really intentional about what you consume. For me, like this is going to sound so silly, but a really big kind of game-changing moment for me was when I actually just got willing to sit down and say like, what do I know about this? Set a timer and like be quiet and like write down what I knew. I feel like before I was always in consumption mode.
Mm.
It's always like, what's the best way to do this? And if I was going to write a podcast episode about something, I mean, this kind of all started before I started my podcast. But let's say I was going to write an article about something, I would do research first. And now my first starting point is always like sit down, get a little quiet, and ask myself what I know about this, what I think about it, what's most important to me. And a lot of times, if I spend, you could set a timer for 15 minutes for yourself for each of the topics you're going to do this on. I know everything I want to say. I don't need to supplement it with something that someone else said or an extra point from somewhere else online. So just taking the time to like literally set a timer, start with your own brain rather than with anything else. That would be one point. And I've kind of lost the question. Actually, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Deep into my thinking.
that's okay. We were talking about content, and you said, you stopped also consuming content, and especially prior to creating the content. So for me, I'm so strict about not consuming other people's content that people will be like, "Hey, did you read this book in the lane?" And at first, I would be like, "Okay, yeah." And I'm like, no, I actually don't. I don't listen to that podcast. I don't listen to that person. I don't listen to that book, or I don't read that book. And at first I was kind of embarrassed, like I should be consuming other space of like time management, productivity. And then I was like, actually, no, like why would I want to consume that? Like, how is that helping with my mindset of me showing up as me? So there's a little story here. So much. I have such a strict diet and boundary on not consuming other people's content that my content manager, who has been with me for 10 years, was like, hey, we were revamping strategy of social media. And she's like, look, I think we should just kind of see, what other people are doing in your space. Like what's trending, and not that you're going to do it if you don't like it, but what if you like it? And we can do that. And I was like, no. And she's like, but we need to see what's hitting the landing with the market. This is like good advice, but I'm like, no. So we finally ended up with, I was like, if you want to do that, you can create your own account and go follow these people and then bring me great advice. But I am not consuming that content. And it is just incredibly helpful. And at this point, it's not even like I have to try to not consume it. It's just not something that I do. So I wanted to just share, like, you could be at any spectrum of this. You could be in total consumption mode. You could be like setting little boundaries, strong boundaries, or as much as me, I have strong boundaries and don't even really realize it until I'm thinking about it, like in this conversation, because it's just the way that I operate my business now.
Mm-hmm. But you do consume stuff just in other, like you would listen to podcasts, just like not productivity podcasts kind of thing.
Correct. Or time management. Yeah. And so what that does though is force me to listen to other people's content in other space and get creative with it. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. How could that translate over? Or, oh, I share a similar message in productivity and this is about health. Isn't that interesting? Like, actually, this is really truthful, because if it works in one arena, it's going to work in other arenas of your life. It's more than just consuming. It makes me actually have to think and ask myself, what are my thoughts about that similar thing in my lane and my topic? So I find that more inspiring than uninspiring, or like actually freezing. I don't know why that word just came up, but like you freeze into inaction when you're consuming other people's content.
Yeah.
Often.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think people's comfort level with this will be different no matter like who you are. Like maybe some people, they can distance themselves a little bit and like it is useful for them to keep an eye on what are other people doing. But I think there's a good chance that a lot of folks, like it might just be most beneficial to like completely clean up what you're consuming, remove your competitors essentially from that feed, and kind of just go your own way. Let yourself be inspired by other industries, other ways of doing things, but not so much the people who are selling the same thing you are to the same audience.
So I'm going to share what's currently inspiring me. I love houseplants now. So my listeners know there's a whole mindset thing. I had this belief that I could not keep anything alive, and it was actually backed with a lot of evidence that that was true. And I was like, I don't like that belief. So I just like went on this whole pursuit of a hobby to be like, can I change that belief? And reality is in something as like not like the stakes aren't high, like it's plants in your house. But what I wanted to do is like prove that so that it could show up in other areas of my business and life. Okay, now fast forward. I consume so much plant content on Instagram. It's crazy. These creators are so creative with how they're sharing tips and tricks and how to keep your plants alive. And I'm just like, actually, I find that incredibly inspiring in something that is completely outside of my lane. And then the other little industry that I've been following a lot lately is textured art. It just inspires me to see their art, but also they're these artists that are like creating all this content. And I'm like, oh, what pieces of that can inspire me in my lane around business, productivity, time management? So anyways, find your thing that inspires you and try and make some translations and maybe that doesn't empower you, but just find the thing that does empower you into taking action and motivate you.
I think the really powerful thing to always bring to all of this consumption, even if it's like you say, like house plants or textured art or fully outside of your zone of work, is the question, what can I learn from this? I listen to true crime a lot, and I, on the surface, would think that that has very little to do with like what I sell, which is like in this business, marketing coaching and marketing support. But I learned so much from some of my favorite podcasts of like what they, not just podcast tactics, but like how are they capturing my attention? Like, why am I so hooked on this story or like this episode or the way that they communicate information? Like, there's this question of what can I learn from this? You can take it to other content you consume. I like that question when it comes to things I've done in the past. Like, okay, I did a big launch. Things did not go as I planned. What can I learn from this? Or things did go as I planned. What can I learn from this? Always bringing that question to literally anything in your life is so powerful. We let so many opportunities to learn go by because we just like aren't willing to accept that there could be possibly something to learn from it. But almost anything you do, you can learn something. Even if it's like, right now, you open up your Instagram insights, you could learn something from that, like literally right now in the next 30 seconds. You could peek around a little bit, notice something that people are really liking or not liking, and like take that into what you're doing. So I think that's just the extra thing I would throw into this conversation is there's always something to learn if you have that question like top of mind.
Yeah. I happen to listen to true crime too, and so does my content manager. And we have had lots of conversations about like what's working, what's not. How are they interjecting like call to actions? How are they teasing the audience before the intro? Like there's so many different formats and other lanes. It's like, okay, well, could that work? Do we want to change that up? And just being in like curiosity mode of like what could work, what pieces do we want to integrate? But yeah, we both happen to like true crime as well. So we get some inspiration there too, as odd as that sounds.
I know.
All right. So we've talked about inspiration. We've talked about, being you. Do you have any other, as we wrap up, like any other last tips around like what works with being consistent that you want to share as we close out today?
Yes. I think the number one thing, and this is a little bit of repetition, but important repetition, is to start out when making any plan by being super honest about your bandwidth. Like so honest and underestimate. And by that, I mean, how many hours per week can I spend on this thing that I'm planning to do? So in this context, we're talking about marketing. How many hours a week can I spend on marketing? Really think through your week. Like most of us probably don't have 10 hours or 20 hours. And we're making plans generally that require 10 or 20 hours or more. So really thinking about your bandwidth, like I have 5 hours I can fully devote to marketing per week. It takes me about an hour to write a marketing email. So that's 1 hour gone. Now I have 4 hours left. Like, really thinking through, how are you going to allocate this very limited amount of time? And actually kind of keeping yourself honest, like when you actually go to create the content, if you've said that it takes you 60 minutes to write an email, try to stick to the 60 minutes. It doesn't have to be like a masterpiece every single time you do it. Just kind of check it off your list. What I like to do for this is literally anything that is a task on my list is in my calendar. So it's like,
Yes, I
From 10
agree
a.m.
with
to
this
11
one.
a.m., I am
Yep.
writing a marketing email. And when the 11 a.m., I don't always exactly fit the amount of time I set out for myself, but I try really hard.
But that's actually a point of data feedback, because if you're putting it on your calendar and you're putting 1 hour and you're at the end of 1 hour and you're like, that's interesting. I didn't distract myself. I wasn't taking phone calls. I wasn't in my inbox. It's going to take longer than an hour. Then maybe next time you don't lie to yourself and you give yourself 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And other times it's like you got to the end of the hour and honestly, the data feedback is like, oh, actually, I could have been done in an hour if I had not let myself get distracted. So we've been talking a lot about feedback and all this, but on the time management productivity side, I really love that strategy. I know that it works. It's a strategy I use and have my clients use. But at the end of it, there's really good information. If you
Absolutely.
look, if you realize like you were doing it for multiple reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. And just one other tiny, super tactical tip I will give people when it comes to marketing is there's really two main questions your marketing needs to answer. One is, how are you getting in front of new people? And the second is, how are you building a relationship with them and converting that to a sale? So typically these are different marketing platforms. So I would think about having at least one thing for each. For example, I'm getting in front of new people through podcast guesting. That is really my main focus, let's say, or I'm going to pitch myself to as many podcasts as possible. And my nurture, my how I'm going to build a relationship and make the sale is email. So those are the two things, let's say, that I'm going really hard on. But you need to make sure that when you pick your marketing activities that you're hitting both of those. Yes, you need to make the sale and ask people to buy and build a relationship, but you can't do that if you haven't been getting in front of new people to begin with. So that would just be when you're going through all of this and trying to figure out what my platforms are, make sure that you're doing both of those things, because that's going to kind of set you up for success as best as possible.
Yeah, it's like a 1-2 punch. They go together. Like you can't just bring new people in and then not serve them and nurture them. And you can't just serve and nurture. There will be nobody left to nurture. So I totally love that advice as we close out. I know you had something special for our listeners, so I'd like you to share that, and then also how they can reach out to you and follow you. And I know you have a podcast as well, so share all your information.
Yeah, so I have a resource for folks who struggle with knowing what to say in their content. If you want 100 content ideas, you can go to makinggoodpodcast.com/100 prompts. And it's just a big list of different marketing prompts that can help you get started and create content that you're going to be excited about and your audience is going to resonate with. So that would be the offer that I have. I also have a podcast. My podcast is called Making Good. I was lucky enough to have Amber on it, and I don't know exactly when things are coming out. So that episode may be live already, may be coming out soon. But my podcast is about marketing, as you would probably expect, and how to do better marketing so that you can make a bigger impact through your business. So it's interviews, it's solo shows, it's a mix of a lot of different formats, but all aimed at helping you do better, more thoughtful, intentional, consistent marketing. So that you can find on any podcast network. Just search Making Good or go to makinggoodpodcast.com. And I'd love to hang out on Instagram as my kind of main social platform. So I'm at Lauren Tilden.
Excellent. We will have all those notes in the show notes of this episode, and we'll also link out to my interview on your podcast and for the opt-in. We'll share more about that in the outro once we have episode numbers and all that. But thank you so much for being here. This was a really great, deep, honest conversation. I think there's a lot of great takeaways for our listeners today. So thanks for spending your time with us.
Thank you so much, Amber. This was such a blast.
I have loved having you listen to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. And I sure hope today's conversation with Lauren was insightful and made you think about your own marketing strategy. No change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. What I would love for you to do is walk away from today's episode getting really clear about what are the types of marketing that you enjoy, that you're good at, that is getting results, that you can be consistent with. Consistency is the key, and you really can't determine if a marketing strategy is working or not working. And For a little bit, you can't even determine if you really like it or are skilled at it until you consistently start doing it, because as with anything, we get better with consistency. So, what have you done in your business that you've been semi-consistent with that would be worth being consistent with to find out if you enjoy it, to find out if you're good at it? That's what I want you to answer. This is not a one-size-fits-all, but I do know that the magic sits in the space between enjoying it, being consistent at it, and being a viable marketing strategy. So what is that for you today? And perhaps you already know what that is, and today's episode is just for you to recommit to that marketing strategy consistently. Before we close out, I want you to know that we can work together. If you want help managing time, creating efficiency, making decisions about what that next hire is, what should you be outsourcing, what exactly are your highest value activities? If you want solutions and methods on reducing stress and overwhelm of running your business, then I would like to talk to you. I invite you to schedule a discovery call so that we can discuss partnering together to get you unstuck, reduce stress, and determine a clear path forward to increase profits. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/call to schedule today. And if you are new here, I want to personally welcome you and thank you for tuning in. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And if you are a longtime listener and you enjoyed today's episode, I would love for you to think of one other business owner that would enjoy today's episode and send it to them and let them know that you found today's conversation to be valuable. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.